Right. We have the live streaming link. And we are live on YouTube. Enjoy the rest of your session.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us in this HLPF special event of the SDG Learning session on tools for the localization of SDGs. This is actually urban and peri-urban tools for the localization of localization of SDGs. This is a training session organized by the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. The Joint Research Center is a science and knowledge service of the Commission, meaning that we don't support a specific policy, but we support other departments of the European Commission, designing and delivering policies with science, knowledge, evidence, and data. And we are specifically working, me and the team that works with me on territorial aspects and data, meaning data that go below the national level and try to analyze the granularity, the diversity, the specificity of phenomena, trends, scenarios in territorial levels that go down to the subnational level up to the city and municipality level. A few years ago, we have started working on localization of SDGs and working with data and indicators, trying to give not only a scientific support to the endeavor of localizing SDGs, but also some inspiration for policymakers in order to let them use what we provide for their actual needs in terms of policy design, implementation, and monitoring. Specifically, we will be talking about the European Handbook for SDG Voluntary Local Reviews that we have launched earlier this year at the World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi. Just a few words on why we are doing this and we're interested in the localization of SDGs. Well, first, because we believe that the local governments are a key actor for the achievement of the SDGs. And we do believe that without the key action at subnational and city and municipal level, the SDGs will not be completely achieved, and we will not fulfill the objective of leaving no one and no place behind. Second, because local actors are capable to mobilize communities, to mobilize people, and to mobilize the resources and energies that are in each and every single place. And third, because we also think that as places are different from each other, we need different ways to measure and to monitor SDGs in function of where these SDGs are and where the policies and the action are implemented in order to achieve these SDGs. So we need a capability, we need an analysis, we need data that go beyond the usual official statistics, and that's why in the handbook we provide also an inspiring mix between traditional indicators and experimental ones. Finally, I would like to say that we are not here to teach anyone how to do that. We are actually here to talk and to share, because we believe that together we can actually act better to bring this topic, this endeavor of localizing SDGs and achieving the SDGs in each and single place a little bit further. I would stop here. I would give immediately the floor to my colleagues, Alice Siragusa and Paola Perietti, who will take the floor and let you through the, I would say, flesh of this session. So please, Alice, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night to everyone connected from many countries, as we have seen from the registration to this training session. Thank you, Alessandro, for introducing this session. I will deliver a first presentation that really focuses on one specific part of the localization of the SDGs, and in particular, in the second part on the handbook. So, in the presentation, I will briefly introduce what we mean by localization of the SDGs, and I will specifically refer to the voluntary local reviews as a tool for the localization of the 2030 agenda. In the third part of the presentation, I will introduce the European Handbook for SDG Voluntary Local Review that we, as Alessandro said, we published this year. And then I will leave the floor to my colleague Paola, who will go into some details of the indicators that are really key in this part of the process. So first of all, I would like to clarify what do we mean by localization of SDGs. In general, the localization of SDGs are defined as the process of defining, implementing, and monitoring strategies at local level, but with the goal to achieve global, national, and subnational sustainable development targets. These processes involve concrete mechanisms, tools, platforms, and processes that enables to translate the development agenda into the results at the local level. The actors that are involved in the localization can be very diverse. Of course, we start with the local governments, so city, towns, supranational authorities, but there are also academia and research centers, civil society, private sector, and religious organization or community organization. And these are just few of the main groups, let's say, that can be involved in the localization of the SDGs. In this process, we will focus in this training specifically on, in this presentation, on the monitoring part, because we think that the local monitoring of the SDG can enable, in particular, cities and subnational governments to highlight successes, but also gaps in the implementation. Of course, monitoring and reporting also inform better decisions using evidences. And the monitoring also enables to benchmark and with other cities and develop process of peer-to-peer learning. In particular, for the SDGs, and this probably is one of the elements that differentiate the SDG monitoring, local monitoring, from others exercise, is that these enable to also be part of a global community. In particular, I will like to recall how we start when we talk about the SDG reporting system. The SDG reporting system has been designed along with the 2030 agenda as a global system that, as many of you already know, encompasses a number of indicators, more than 200 indicators that cover all targets, but this is designed at country level and establish a sound reporting mechanism in which countries periodically report to the UN system, to the agencies and to the HLPF, for example. But still, along with this, the commitment of member states to report about the SDGs, some local authorities started to also reporting about their achievement towards the 2030 agenda. In particular, the first ones have been New York in 2018 and the Basque Country in Spain in 2017. So there have been a number of emerging experiences of cities and subnational governments that starting to report against the SDGs with very different approaches. Why a city should we start using the VLR, the reporting has a way, a tool to localize the SDGs, because these processes come with a number of benefits, both internal and externals. Internal benefits for the city regards the disclosure of hidden connection among different departments, for example, but also to have a common framework to speak both with the different stakeholders. There is reporting with a sound and harmonized system enables to make links between priority and data, and of course also to establish sustainable networks. But the reporting also comes with a number of external benefits, both at local and at global scale. At local scale, reporting guarantee accountability of the public administration, but also enables to build new cross-sectoral partnership and also to strengthen the leadership of the city. There are also some external benefits at global scale, like, as I mentioned, the engagement with the local community, but also the highlighting the role of city leaders on the world stage, but at the same time also to bring into the global conversation cities' priorities. And this is one key element that is definitely very strong in the debate about the localization of the SDGs. As I said, there are a number of cities. This has been defined as the first generation of VLRs. On this map, I indicate some of them. This is the first year when we will have 4 African cities that publish VLR. And as you see in Europe, we have many examples of VLR already produced in different countries. But the local reporting also comes with many challenges. And here I just listed some of them, the main ones. The first, of course, is to adapt a global framework to the regional and the national context. So, of course, measuring something that is monitoring aspects that are, let's say, encompasses in the local in the national situation. The monitoring system should be designed to address the local level, of course. It should have a limited number of indicators, because it's very hard to think that the small and medium cities could measure periodically more than 200 indicators, so the number probably should be reduced. And of course, the main goal should always be to try to illustrate the local action and achievement, and I would say also to highlight the main gaps where priority or action are more needed. A city willing to start producing a VLR, of course, can look at official guidelines. Most of the front runners and the first generation of cities that produce VLRs look at the voluntary national review guidelines. Now UNDESA is also working on a VLR guidelines. Of course, many of them are looking at example of VLRs already produced, and here I list some of the city. Plus, there are a number of different materials produced by city networks and research institutions. But still, when these cities refer to the global indicators, it was very hard for them to use these indicators, because of course they are designed to calculate national averages. Of course, by nature, they tend to hide inequalities among regions, some part of the country, and even cities. And of course, they cannot represent the area of competence of local governments. There are also examples of regions like Europe, where the European Statistical Office, Eurostat, produced a specific tailored EU SDG indicator set. But as well, this cannot be easily replicated to other contexts in the world. Despite all these challenges, it is clear that developing the local statistical capacity, collecting data, monitoring, evaluating, and engaging in these data efforts all these actions are critical elements for the successful implementation of the SDGs. That's why at the JRC we decided to work on a specific tool that I will now briefly introduce. It's the European Handbook for SDG Voluntary Local Reviews. This project has been developed in cooperation with the Director General for Urban and Regional Policies of the European Commission. The handbook has been launched at the last World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi in February and is available online for free and is among the reference material of this training as well. In particular, the handbook supports European cities willing to prepare the SDG Voluntary Local Reviews, offering a framework for the selection of appropriate indicators that needs to be tailored to the local review and to the local context, but also ensuring comparability among cities. I would like to highlight that the European Handbook targets specifically European local and subnational authorities, but the same rationale can be translated and applied to other regions of the world. So the method and the indication that we give in the handbook can be also translated into other world regions that, of course, have different situation and face different challenges. The main content of the handbook is on the indicators, because we really felt that that was an area where most support was needed by city. The structure of the handbook is quite simple. It is shaped in 3 parts. The first part really introduced the monitoring of the SDG at local scale, explaining what are the VLRs and some introduction on the different SDG monitoring systems. In this part, we also highlighted some of the data challenges for local authorities, and Paola after will introduce also these some of the main ones. Of course, we also refer to what are the main components that are recurrent in the VLRs already published. And of course, we explain how we selected the indicators. The second part, it's really on the indicators. What are the urban indicators that a city can use to monitor in the SDGs? And here we provide examples for indicators for all 17 SDGs. So it's not only about SDG 11, but it's for all the SDGs. And the presentation of Paola really will focus on this, so I will not go into the details. The third part is about reports about some of the highlights from the already published VRR and give some suggestion on how to integrate the SDG into the strategic plan, the SDG monitoring into the strategic plan, concluding with some technical consideration on methods and comparability among VLR. In conclusion, I would like to present some of the activities that we will continue to develop, in particular working with cities, with trainings like this one, but also with smaller groups. We, of course, will continue to work with other partners developing specific indicators, so with expert group meetings on the development of methodology for singular indicators, in particular, for example, the one on air quality or public space, transportation, etc. And of course, we will continue to cooperate with the other partners, city networks, UN agencies, other research institutions. We aim at publishing within 2 years a second edition of the handbook, in which we would like to incorporate suggestions, but also new indicators that can be of inspiration for cities for the VLRs. Of course, I'm available to clarify any points both in the Q&A and in the follow-up session. Thank you very much. Alessandro, back to you.
Thank you very much, Alice. I would give immediately the floor to Paola, so we go through the whole array of this first session, so presentation of this first session, and then I would propose, if we have enough time, we can get a couple of questions from the audience. So please, Paola, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
No, vedo il... Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, welcome again to everybody. I'm Paola, always from the Joint Research Center. And today I will focus my presentation, as anticipated by Alice, on the methods and indicators for the local monitoring of the SDGs. Sorry. Okay. As already mentioned by my colleague Alice, during the presentation of the European Handbook, we emerged that several local authorities face challenges while trying to create their voluntary local review and their assessment. Some of the challenges might be the fact that data is usually stored or collected by different departments and might be not readily available, for example, in terms of format or right of dissemination. Another challenge that local authorities might face is the lack of adequate financial resources. And this could be an obstacle to create data with wide temporal extension, for example, or high level of disaggregation. Another challenge is the lack of capacity or trained staff which can collect or disseminate properly data. But also local authorities have to understand how to balance the use of indicators which can be comparable across cities and could help cities benchmarking themselves against other cities, but also trying to measure issues which are important for the local context. Furthermore, actually cities have also to choose among privileging, for example, the implementation of existing data or focusing on creating new data, for example, to monitor dimensions that had been neglected before. So, I'm sorry, the presentation doesn't change. So in this context, and inspired by the words of the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, only what gets measured gets done, we decided to dedicate the second part of the European Handbook to urban indicators for the SDGs in Europe. In this context, we decided to offer and to create and to offer an inspirational framework for city officials, for researchers and professionals to help them preparing the data backbone for their VLR. So which were the rationale that we follow in the creation of this framework? We first look in the UN SDG Global Framework, and so to the goals, targets, and indicators measured by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Then we also studied the indicators proposed in the European set of indicators created by Eurostat, and which is targeting mainly the national levels. And finally, we decided to try to look for indicators which could be also locally relevant. And for locally relevant, we mean that they could cover areas on which cities have competencies. So we decided to include both official and experimental indicator. For official indicator, we mean all the indicators which are created and disseminating according to the fundamental principle of official statistics. While for experimental indicator, we mean all those indicators which are produced through innovative methodology and modeling techniques. And also we try to include, as it was mentioned before by my colleague Alice, both harmonized and unharmonized indicators. Why? Because of course we know that comparability is important, but also targeting local specificity and issue is also important. Finally, we try to balance the selection of indicators, so to be able to monitor all the dimensions which are most relevant to obtain sustainability, so the social, the economic, and also the environmental dimensions. In the end, we included 71 indicators, 45 official and 26 experimental. Looking at the similarity of these indicators with those proposed in the UN Global Indicator Framework or the EU set of indicators, we included 6 indicators which match both the EU set and also the UN Global Framework, 5 which only match the UN Global Indicator Framework, and 10 which only match the EU SDG indicator set. Our indicators, we didn't create ourselves for the scope of this publication, the indicators, but we tried to analyze all the indicators available, both from international organizations or institutions like the JRC itself, but also OECD, the European Environmental Agency, but also other sources like national statistical systems, local administration, NGOs, and universities. So as for the layout of the publication, every goal is presented in the following way. There is a short description of the goal, then there is a contextualization of the goal in the European context, and then it is also mentioned the relevance of the goal for the local level. After each goal description, a fiche per indicator measuring that goal is also proposed. On the left-hand side, you can find a side bookmark in which the main information on the indicator are available. There is then a box in which information on the indicators are offered, for example, the definition of the indicator, but also some reflection on its potential use and limitation. And finally, on the right-hand side, there are the key metadata. This layout allowed us to include both graphical elements and also textual section. For example, on the left-hand side, in the side bookmark, you can see that we have the SDG icon. Then we have the type of indicator. So if there is this icon like a temple, it means that the indicator is official, otherwise it is experimental. Then we have a box in which we include the interlinkages, so all the goals that can be measured through the indicator. We have then a section specifying if that indicator is coherent with the indicator proposed in the UN or EU list. We have the coverage, in this case EU28. We have the aggregation level at which the indicator is available, cities and greater cities in this case. We have the number of local units for which it is available. And finally, also the source, in this case, Eurostat. So in this second part of the presentation, I will try to present you a selection of the indicators we included in the European Handbook. This would be particularly useful, we hope, to clarify some of the concepts we have expressed so far, but also to give you an idea of the variety and of the typology of indicators that are included in the handbook. The first example is the indicator of adolescent births. The definition of this indicator is the following: the adolescent births is the rate of is the number of live births per woman aged 10 to 19 years old. We use this indicator to measure goal 3 about health and well-being, but as I said before, this indicator can be useful also to measure other goals like the 1st, the 4th, the 5th, or the 10th. This indicator is coherent with the indicator proposed in the UN list and is produced by Eurostat, and as it is already available for 300 cities across Europe. But why we decided to include this indicator? Because actually in the literature, it is said, it is reported that adolescent pregnancies are sometimes connected to a wide range of risks for young mothers and their newborns. And so monitoring these aspects might be relevant in some context. As a second example, we have the share of non-native speaking students graduating from upper secondary school. As you can see, this indicator is not mentioned either in the UN or the EU list, and it is available only for one city, the city of Helsinki, which included it in its own VLR. But why we propose this indicator? Because actually it's an example of the necessity to include both indicators which are comparable across cities, but also which could help monitor specific contexts. As for the third example, we would like to mention the perception about the local labor market. This indicator measures the share of people with a negative perception of their city labor market. And it is an indicator which is collected through a survey from DG Regio and Eurostat, a survey called Eurobarometer, which asks people how is their feeling about the labor market in their city. Why we included this indicator? Because actually sometimes it's not only important to look at outcomes, but also at perception, because they can then be very linked and they can cause the outcomes. And so we also included this indicator, which is available already for 83 cities across Europe. As for the social relevance of this indicator, we can mention the fact that in the literature it is said that actually bad perception about the local labor market can lower the bargaining power of unemployed people and could lead them to accept also lower wages. As for the fourth example, we have an indicator which is the share of population without green urban areas in their neighborhood. These indicators, unlike the indicator presented so far, which were collected through, for example, administrative data, as for the share of students graduating, or through survey, as the indicator on perception about the labor market, this indicator is calculated through modeling techniques. How? Putting together a layer bringing the information on the population at the very high level of disaggregation, putting together the network of walkable streets, and also the distribution of green areas, which is obtained through satellite images. So of course, this indicator is quite difficult to calculate for cities by themselves, but luckily it has already been calculated by DG Regio and already available for 800 cities around Europe. So a city that would like to include this indicator in its own VLR can just go on the website of DG Regio and look at the figure for its own context and just include in the VLR. But actually looking at the existence and accessibility of public spaces, it's not enough. Also their quality is something it might be worth to look at. So we included also this indicator, which is called bathing sites with excellent water quality, which is also an indicator trying to look at the, to qualify, and not only to measure how much, but also how. Actually, this indicator is also very peculiar because to calculate it, the European Environmental Agency had to take some samples from the water of different bathing sites and analyze it against several types of bacteria. But also this indicator is not on city to calculate, but it is already available for 22,000 municipalities across Europe. This indicator is also coherent with one of the indicators included in the EU list of indicators. Finally, the last example for today is the voter turnout in municipal election. This indicator gives the share of people who vote in a municipal election over the total eligible population. Of course, there is not an already made database which compares the voter turnout across all European cities. There is not, it's not available yet, maybe it will be, but of course all municipalities know about the voter turnout in their own territory. So this indicator can be easily included by every municipality in its own VLR. And also consider the importance of this information, because voter turnout is often used as a proxy, for example, for democratic legitimacy. So trying to conclude how a city could improve its local monitoring. Actually, a good starting point would be that of trying to really focus on priorities, try to look at which data are already available to measure the progress of the municipalities towards the goal. Also trying to see if in the municipality there are official data that can measure progresses towards the achievement of a certain goal. And also trying to complement the data available with also non-traditional sources, if possible. Another important step would be that of disaggregating data as much as possible, both according to population characteristics, for example, like sex or age, but also disaggregated from the geographical point of view, trying to go at the highest possible disaggregation. Another very important element is try to not look at indicators by themselves, but to try to contextualize them in time. And so to look at trends and to also look at the distance from the current situation and the goal. Finally, what is also very important is to try to create partnership and to have a continuous exchange with others, for example, with peer cities, but also with the universities, research center, because this can higher the quality of the monitoring. To conclude, our work will not stop. We will continue supporting and fostering the knowledge on territories and to help them, try to help them in achieving a more sustainable future. How are we going to do that? Trying to identify new indicators and data that are already available and already made by others. Try to produce ourselves some new data which could support local authorities. Continue to provide scientific support to this process, and also try to make knowledge available in as much as possible a user-friendly format. So on the website you can see on the right, you can find some of the information that we have been sharing today, but also some of the data you can download if you are interested and maybe use for your own assessment. So my presentation is concluded. I would like to thank all of you for your attention. And if you need any information, please contact me or my colleague Alice at our email address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paola. I think you all now understand how much I'm privileged to work with such amazing scientists. I would also like to say that we have some minutes for a quick question and answer round. Thanks a lot for putting your questions in the Q&A thread. I have tried to gather a little bit the questions. There are three main groups of questions in my view. One is about the incentives. So what are the incentives for local governments to conduct voluntary local reviews? Why they should they do that? The second one is about availability of data with regard to small towns or rural villages. I think that's very pertinent. And the third one is about linking indicators, so linking this exercise to actual policy. So what is a VLR for in the end? I'm fine to take some of these, but first I would like to give the floor to Alice and Paola, so maybe I minimize my own commitment to this. Maybe Alice first.
Yes, I think maybe yes with Paola, because we are in the same room, so we can definitely take this together. We have also been discussing these topics. I think these are very relevant questions. I would like to start with the first one: why a city should produce a BLR? But the question is more why a city should take the agenda as the 2030 agenda as a framework for defining strategies. I think that the 2030 agenda is a common language. It's quite easy to understand. Is really something that is easy to communicate also to local communities. Of course, it's complex. There are many interlinkages, but can definitely be adapted and be tailored to the local situation. So a city can structure its own local strategy, development strategies around the SDGs, maybe identifying the goals that are more relevant, more pressing, more urgent in the city. I definitely understand there was a comment in the chat and in the question. I definitely understand that not every city is willing or able to report on all SDGs, and this is not definitely needed. Of course, in the handbook, we provided example for all because we wanted to highlight the fact that most of the time, in many contexts, data exists, can be extrapolated by administrative data, can be collected by NGOs, by local actors. Of course, it is an effort to bring a platform to collect this information and then to use them to define the strategy and to monitor the local strategy. So it's a process that should be doesn't come at the end, but should come with the definition of the city development strategies. And I think that Serena's presentation after me will tackle this topic, so I will not go into details. Regarding the availability of data, and probably this also answers to the third question. Regarding the availability of data, of course, we are definitely aware that Europe is one of the places in the world where data are most available, and there are institutions that harmonize this information. So definitely there is an advantage in certain contexts, and some places are definitely lacking capacity and statistical capacity. But still, I think that probably there is a lack in the dialogue between data producers, data collectors of different kinds, research institutions, as I said, associations, universities, but also administration themselves. Many of them, they are not aware of all the wealth of informations and knowledge that they have in their administration. Of course, it's a process of digging into the what is existing and try to highlight and use what is already available. I think that this is also, the VLRs as also a call to national statistical systems to produce and collect data at local level. So, and this is definitely a challenge. The last thing that I would like to mention, the data collection should be affordable. Should be something that the city can really afford to do, even a small and small city. And new technologies for some SDG can really help. And in the next couple of years, we will see new indicators available at very fine scale using new methods and techniques. I will stop here.
Thank you, Alice. And maybe Paola, would you like to add something?
I would like to add something on urban-rural, because I saw that there was also a question about that. Mm-hmm. Of course, for the moment, our handbook is mainly focusing on urban and cities, but many of the indicators, for example, we have suggested also today, they can also be measured by rural places, and rural municipalities. So our work will continue, and we might also produce something specifically on rural. But to start with, many municipalities may already look at this work to start the process of trying to monitor their progresses, and of course we will also improve from our side the knowledge as much as we can, also to support those territories. Thank you.
Thank you, Paola. I would just like to add a few words on the issue of linking voluntary local reviews to policies. Of course, it is, I would say, the natural consequence of the work that we are doing. There has been so far a movement of local authorities presenting voluntary local reviews to the UN system, also with a view to legitimate themselves as concrete, direct interlocutors of the United Nations. But I think that there is also a political interest in the local authority itself, be it a subnational entity, a city, a village, to link their ability to measure their policy effort to the SDGs, because the SDGs in a way reflect what is the well-being, or the level of well-being, the level of happiness of a community. And that is exactly what local authorities would like to achieve. But I think the next session would give more concrete answers to these questions. And I would suggest to go immediately to the next session. So the next session is about a panel discussion. And the speakers will provide some insights on the issue of localization of SDGs, including voluntary local reviews, from different perspectives, from the perspective of a local authority, of an NGO, or a professional entity. I think this will give exactly the linkage that we would like to see and discuss from the work that we as science and knowledge providers do to the actual usefulness of this work and the applications that can be given to this work. So the next session will have 3 speakers and a discussant. I will introduce them all right now. So the speakers will be in this order. The first speaker is Serena Foracchia, who's a former councillor for international city at the city of Reggio Emilia in northern Italy. Welcome, Serena. The second speaker is Norlisa Hashim. She's Chief Executive Officer of Urbanize Malaysia. And really a warm welcome and appreciation for her being with us at this late hour, or very early hour maybe, for Malaysia. And the third speaker is Enrique Fuster. Enrique is an expert working at Siris Academic, and he will also share his point of view. Altogether, at the end, we will benefit from Alexander Heichlinger in the role of a discussant. Alexander is an international expert on these topics and has a long-standing experience, so we will definitely benefit from this whole session. But let's start with Serena Foracchia. So Serena, the floor is yours. Around I would say 8 minutes, if possible, please.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm sharing with you my presentation so that maybe it's easier for you to follow me. So once again, I'm Serena Foracchia from Reggio Emilia. Reggio Emilia is an Italian municipality. It's a medium-sized city located in northern Italy in the Emilia-Romagna region, which is one of the wealthy regions of Italy and Europe, but also severely hit by the present pandemic. The city of Reggio Emilia and the territory, I must say, the community, decided to start a process, a strategic planning process based on the SDGs. And I'm addressing here the first question that was put on in the previous session. Why would a municipality engage into the SDG process, strategic planning around the SDG process? To us, basically, the SDGs were very unknown in the 5 years ago, but gradually the awareness of the local population started to increase, thanks to a series of projects that the NGOs and civil societies were carrying on at the local level, but also regional guidelines were addressing the issue of the SDGs and calling for local action on the SDGs. But most important is that the value and traditions of the territory were very much in line with the SDGs. And the policymakers somehow understood that there was a match. It was just a different alphabet that was used on an international base and on a local base. So shaping the strategic planning process around the SDGs was basically framing the values and the willingness to proceed of the local territory with a new alphabet that was able to share the experience of Reggio Emilia with other parts of the world. And this was very much important. So the idea was to set a new strategic planning process, no longer focused on the concept of economic development, rather focused on the concept, the wider concept of community development and involving cultural, educational, social, and institutional aspects. And so we adopted the 17 goals framework. The approach that we have presented to the municipality. Now, I must say that the process is still ongoing. So the process started 1 year ago in its formulation. It was meant to start in its implementation phase in 2020, so in between February and March. But because of the situation, it was stopped. And so presently, we are presenting to you a process that is still pending. But I'm sharing with you the situation and the lessons learned that we have gained so far. So basically, the approach that we have presented had 3 specific features. It was based on the SDGs because we wanted to demonstrate that the policies were somehow intertwined. They were affecting one the other. Usually when you have a process, you focus on the educational policy, on the economic policy or environmental policy, and you don't look at the cross-cutting effects. So by adopting the SDGs, we wanted to invite the local community to understand that there was effects that were somehow entering different domains. And Alice was telling before in the previous session that by adopting the SDG framework, you create connections among the different departments of the municipality. And this is very important and was actually the effect that we were searching in the strategic development process. The other aspect, the second aspect that we wanted to focus on was a mission-oriented approach. So we wanted to invite the population and the community to understand how the city was performing in terms of the 17 goals, but also what was important and what really was meaningful to the population and to the stakeholders of the Reggio Emilia territory. Last but not least, and this is the most important aspect, this was and still is a strategic planning process of a community. So it was led by the municipality, but it was not meant to be carried on by the municipality itself. it went far beyond the municipal documents, so the single municipality documents. It was a process of educating the community, starting from the stakeholders, going all the way to the everyday people, allowing each one to own the process. So this was the idea. Obviously, step one included the assessment, and that's when we have encountered the work and of the VLR and the handbook, and we have somehow adopted this the suggestions of the handbook. And the idea is as soon as we will have the possibility to create a group of experts that will engage in the assessment, involving, as said before, different actors, university, statistical officers of the municipality, of the Chamber of Commerce, of the local entrepreneurial association, and so on, to pool their knowledge and define together the available data set. As I said before, this was meant to be and is meant to be an educating process, a pedagogic experience, both for the municipality civil servants, for the policymakers and decision makers, and for the citizens themselves. So the process included also a one-year training action for the citizens. We have felt some constraints and some obstacles because of the pandemic situation. And now I want to highlight to your attention three effects. Now, obviously, a major change in the development paradigm. The mayor has changed his role completely. So the community approach that we were counting on and pushing for became a one-man stand, because the role of the mayor became more and more relevant in facing the pandemic. And so what the mayor was stating was just followed by the rest of the population. So instead of having a more shared approach, the pandemic brought to a more led approach. But what is most important is that because of the lockdown and the situation, now speaking of the SDGs is not so easy anymore. Why so? Because it's perceived by the population as something that is top down, is something that is not belonging to the everyday need of the population. And so this created a sort of distance with respect to the approach that we were presenting. And another element is that no longer there is a need of having a stand in an international debate. It's rather focused on your national and very local response. Third element, which unfortunately happens, is when you have an emergency or crisis, you tend to forget the long-term vision and you focus obviously on the short-term vision. So these are elements, constraints. There are also positive sides of what we have experienced. Obviously, citizens somehow became more conscious of the interdependency of the different policies. So education, for example, health and economic aspects, health and social aspects. Another issue that is very positive to us and that will somehow help us in implementing the process is that the attention towards data and towards indicator is higher amongst the citizens. So this is something that will make it easier for us to progress and to advance the situation. And concluding, what we have learned and what we want to stress is that the 17 goals are all important, and it's important for us to shape this process, the strategic planning process, around and considering all 17 of the goals, understanding that some goals may be not relevant now, but may appear to be very relevant through time. So we must not just focus on single aspects. Maybe they're not relevant now, but we must consider them and they will become more relevant. Health for us was a given situation. We were sure about our health conditions and we were never, we were not thinking of focusing on health priorities or health indicators or the goal SDG 3. We would have rather focused on another SDG. But because of the situation, priority is now the health situation. So when planning, when looking ahead, we have to consider all 17. A strong determination in political terms is very, very much needed because it's a very, very complex situation. It's complex because it changes the way of working inside the municipality. It changes relation within the stakeholder domain, and it also needs to be very much explained to the citizens, especially when the distance between the SDG language and the everyday language of the needs of the population seems so distant. Another important aspect that we have learned is that this process still needs to be a process that goes beyond the internal document of the municipality. We have adopted the SDGs as a frame for internal documents. What we want is something stronger, an effect that will involve the whole community and the whole population. So basically, this is what we look forward to keep on doing, guiding with an eye on today's need, yet shaping a new future and shaping a transition which is conscious, which we as a community understand and fully are aware of what we are able of doing and where we are going. This is a process, again, that has not been completed yet. So I'm sharing with you a process that has been discussed for 1 year with the municipality that has been changed because of the recent lockdown and pandemic situation, and hopefully will start in September, October. For questions and further details, obviously the time is limited, so you can ask me for more details and I'll be happy to reply.
Thank you very much, Serena. Thanks a lot for the insights you have given us. I think it was a very interesting narrative across the growth of a community through SDGs, actually. So how the actual topic of the SDGs has triggered a collective consciousness and an evolution of how a community interacts and on the targets that it wants to achieve. So let's go immediately to Nurliza Hashim, and I'll give Nurliza immediately the floor because we are looking forward to hear about the Malaysian experience. Please, Nurliza, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'll get the screen on now. Yes. So I think I've actually learned a lot from the previous presenters, and definitely it's really hoping that we can share some of the work we do here in Malaysia. I think when we first started also, when we looked at the SDGs, it was something that, it was how do we really localize all the 17 SDGs. So even though we tried to, we went on a journey of trying to make people understand what the SDGs are, then we really realized that at the local level, it is actually not a very simple exercise because we face the similar challenges has been raised by Alice, Alicia, as well as Serena on how some of the local governments also are challenged to collect data and how their understanding are on the SDGs. So Malaysia itself, we have our Malaysia National Voluntary Review that was done in 2017. And in that review, the government key focus was to eradicate poverty and promote prosperity, especially in the changing world. So Malaysia reports in 8 SDGs in 2017. And we were also quite concerned that SDG 11, which covers sustainable cities and communities, was not part of the reporting. And that was also, in a way, a reflection that localization is important and data needs to be collected at that level. So in localizing the SDGs, in Malaysia, planning and development are mostly done at 3 levels: the national level, state level, as well as the local level. So it's also important for us to ensure that the SDG localization is aligned to whatever planning and blueprints that are already being done at various levels of governments. So, sorry. Yeah, and in Malaysia, the governance structure for the SDG implementation, we have a council at the national level. And the coordinating agency is actually our economic planning unit. And in the past, we tried to actually look at the various SDGs and group them into 5 main groups. But as you can see, these are very high level committees, and the challenge will be how to bring this high level work that's being done at the national level to the local level. So what we've done is also try to come up with a more simpler way of making our communities as well as our local governments understand what this agenda is all about. And we frame it in a more simple context on how Malaysia's sustainable agenda itself, because Malaysia is actually quite an urban nation. We are almost 77% urbanized, and hence the agenda of a sustainable urban nation is very important. And this is where we position the 17 SDGs and how cities could actually use the SDGs to frame their sustainable agenda at the local level, and also to link that with the new urban agenda as the means and enablers to actually accelerate the implementation of the SDGs. So Malaysia, because we also have a lot of policies which are driving the sustainable agenda for the nation, and hence linking these global targets and goals with our own national vision, our own national targets is also, I think, very, very important. And that translation actually is actually quite difficult for a local level to undertake. And that's the reason why Urbanists, we are actually a think tank under the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. We assist actually this form of translation. And we also translate the importance of for all Malaysian cities to actually prepare a roadmap in order for them to translate the SDG to the local level, And of course, we had to make it as simple as possible for them to understand why it's important for them to have another roadmap, because at the local level, they also have their own blueprints. They also have their planning and development master plans, which they have been using for the last 2 to 3 decades. So it's important that whatever is being done, it's aligned to what they have already been currently practiced. Because the sustainable agenda for Malaysia is not a new thing, you know. Since the 70s, we have actually embed the agenda in most of our national policies. The other key challenge we have is that we have 154 local governments in Malaysia. But when we looked across the current function of our local government, it's very actually difficult to actually place where this function actually fits into their current jurisdiction. Hence, we actually had to look across the entire spectrum of the legal framework that governs the local government and try to link that to the various SDGs, you know, so that our local government understands in which areas can they link back to the enabling powers to allow them to actually implement the SDGs at the local level. So we also went through a lot of the SDGs targets, you know, and when we look through, only 69% of the SDGs can be implemented at the local level. So this is something that will give that comfort level that, you know, that not necessarily all should be reported on, and it gives them that progressive importance on what to focus in terms of localization of the SDGs. So here we are looking at SDG 6, 11 and 12 being the most important that links to the current function of Malaysia's local government. So what we did is actually we came up with a more simple process for all our cities to use, and we came up with a city profiling and diagnostic process where cities actually looked at what they have, they map it up, and they try to align it to the SDGs and also to the new urban agenda to recognize what activities have already been done, what is compatible, and from there, what gaps are there in the current activities that they have done. From there, we encourage cities to revisit their city vision, because in Malaysia, most of the city have their blueprints actually have set their planning vision and framework for 5 to 10 years. So this is where they reaffirm back what is this vision once they have actually mapped out and aligned to the SDGs. And from there, they can set priorities on what are the issues on the ground, and how this vision can be revisited based on the SDGs that they think are important. So then from there, we encourage cities to develop their own local actions and roadmaps. And this is where I think they can prioritize, they can try to determine which SDGs are important based on their own comfort or competency level, or whatever information that they have, or whatever resources they have locally. And from there, what we are doing through the government also is to encourage as many cities in Malaysia to prepare the voluntary local review. So as of now, of course, we only have interest from the cities. We've not yet submitted any VLR yet. So our target is for 2021 to at least submit 2 cities for the VLR. So this process actually, we linked it to...
Norlisa, can I ask you to wrap up a little bit your presentation? Sorry for this, but we are getting a bit late.
Okay. So what we've done is also we've linked it to all our national policies. And this is where the outcomes are linked to the importance of our policies. But linking back to the discussion by Alicia and Paula just now, we are also now developing our own local indicators for Malaysia. This is an ongoing process, and And so that, because we've looked at what the various global targets are, and we see that some of them are very difficult for our local authorities to actually obtain this data, and hence we have actually come up with a set of local indicators to assist our cities. So these are our own methodology, but I think I don't have much time to go through this. But it shows that the process of how we analyze, we align the works that's being done, and the gaps that these cities can identify, and how cities can actually later on prioritize their SDGs implementation. And from there only we will start the VLR local process, which we've been talking to New York, and they have also given us examples on how to move forward with this. So I think I should stop there for now. Thank you very much for allowing me to share with you on what we are doing here in Malaysia.
Thank you very much, Narlisa. It's an amazing effort what you are doing in Malaysia, from the national level down to the local level, and with rigorous methodologies. I think that we will share all the presentations with the participants, and we will have time in the next days or so to try to respond to all questions that we cannot respond today. So I would go then to Enrique Fuster. Enrique, the floor is yours. I would kindly ask you to be very, very concise. I know you have a lot to say, but please.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. Enrique Fuster from CIES Academic in Barcelona. And today we're going to speak about the identification of science and innovation activities which support or contribute to addressing the SDGs. Since 2015, in the Addis Ababa Agenda, science, technology, and innovation strategies were adopted as elements of a national sustainable development strategy. And this is not only affects at the national level, but also top-down regions, cities, and bottom-up universities, research institutions, companies define their own STI policy or their strategies in relation to the Agenda 2030. And once you want to develop your SDG priorities through science, technology, innovation, you have a few challenges which are especially relevant at the local and regional level, which is how to identify science and innovation actors and skills in these topics, how to set priorities at the local level, and how to mobilize the actors towards SDG-oriented innovation. So for this, there are mainly three ways of addressing that. One is qualitative research. Then the most effective probably is stakeholder engagement and constant dialogue from policymakers, from institutions with the stakeholders. And for a snapshot of what happens, you can also use data. And what we are doing is we are using different types of data of science and innovation, like scientific publications, projects and grants, higher education syllabus of courses and programs, patents, to identify the specific, the ones that do relate to each of the SDGs. And how did we do that? Through a control vocabulary, which is basically a list of words and phrases that help you tag units of information. Well, we built the vocabulary from a manual starting point. Through machine learning, we expanded it with a lot of more words, case synonyms, related words. And finally, we use this to identify texts with the terms of the vocabulary. How does the vocabulary look like? Now it has around 3,500 words, like these ones: biodegradable bag, bio-waste, circular economy, compost pile, etc. And what we want is to find these words in the publications or the projects, etc., that we want to analyze in our local or regional stakeholders. So now we're going to present a couple examples. The first one is at a regional level in Spain, Catalonia. And then a second one would be at the level of a series of municipalities in a local territory. So in Catalonia, they want to establish the science and innovation policy, which is called Catalan Smart Specialization, because it's a European policy model, through shared agendas for sustainability and social change. So they want to focus activity in research and innovation towards these shared collective agendas. And to see who is acting and in what topics, what we did is to analyze 3,000 research and innovation projects, and we classified them into the SDGs, the first 16 SDGs. You can access the data in this link. And what do? We classify them. For instance, these two projects are classified in SDG 2 Zero Hunger. Bringing local and sustainable produce back to the city is a project, or climate monitoring and seasonal forecast for global agricultural production, which is a project by a computer science institution. And for each of these projects, we provide policymakers and stakeholders all the information about what topics, who is participating, and we map the collaboration networks, because when you want to address local or regional priorities, you have to make sure that you know the stakeholders, that the stakeholders are well connected, or if not, to connect them. And for that, we also classify the stakeholders by typologies. And for instance, in orange, you can see NGOs and foundations. In the case of Zero Hunger, there were 50 million of investment in the last years in projects addressing SDG Zero Hunger. And once this identification is done, the next step is to mobilize the actors towards these activities. And for this, several methodologies exist. And here, as I explained before, they're going to pilot the shared agendas for sustainability and social change. There are a few already which have started, one in rural innovation, another on industrial waste recuperation, etc. And the point is to establish visions and then to mobilize the actors towards this change. The second example is in France, in a local territory, and is led by a local university. It's a university which is very linked to the territory, which is in the outskirts to the southeast of Paris. It is a research university, but not research intensive, not the ones that we all know. And it has a comprehensive thematic coverage, but a focus on social science and humanities and in medicine. And in their last strategic planification, they said that they would want to become a committed university focused on the challenges of social transformation. So the question is, how do we set meaningful for the territory, but also viable in terms of the skills and actors that we can mobilize in science and innovation? So in this case, what we did is to look at the scientific publications by the researchers and professors of this university, and we classified them on the SDGs from two data sources: a very well-known international data source with a lot of English publications, and one which is local, open access, and with a different disciplinary and language coverage with much more French publications. And what we found is that the top two SDGs in terms of content were SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and 3, Good Health and Well-being, which also was their relative specialization in relation to other French actors. So in the context of these two priorities, which they know they have the capacities to address, they have defined a long-term innovation project on how social and environmental factors impact an urban population, which is this around 11 municipalities to the southeast of Paris. This project is not only research, it's committed to improving people's lives through public health. How? Through close collaboration between regional and local authorities, local stakeholders, knowledge partners, and by applying new ways of doing research and innovation with the territory, establishing a living lab, promoting citizen science with the people in the communities, promoting also open science practices in the university, and hopefully it will also positively impact education programs and student engagement, so how students connect with the city and connect with the citizens around them. So addressing the objectives of the session, I will summarize a few of the quick key questions at the end of the presentation. So what this is a toolkit to identify, map, and characterize SDG-related texts. And it must be said that this is something that started a bit more than a year ago, and the JRC was one of the institutions that really said this is important. We have to mobilize and direct science and innovation towards the SDGs. So it's still early for conclusions in terms of results in implementation, but a few challenges and lessons from the process so far can be summarized. The first is that in terms of localization, it is necessary to adapt and extend the control vocabulary to the local challenges, to translate text or to use sources which are in local languages, obviously, and include local the topics of interest. A second element, or a big challenge is, okay, how do we find social and non-technological innovation in these data sources? So this requires a special focus. You have to look for special data sources, special vocabularies, and then once you find them, really engage them with your activities. And how to interact with the stakeholders? Well, we found that actually this process of building a common understanding of a topic challenge, or a challenge to the control vocabulary is a very strong way of engaging with the stakeholders and also strengthening the mutual knowledge between stakeholders. And in relation to upscaling or using this methodology elsewhere, so the first key element is that this SDG vocabulary is open and you can use it from this link that I guess will be shared with all of you. Can be used for any institution or geographical perimeter, a municipality, a region, or even the world. And once you have this identified, so the actors and the topics, there are many methodologies for priority setting and stakeholder mobilization in the territory that you can test and use, no? Like the concept of responsible research and innovation, the same concept of smart specialization, STI roadmap for the SDGs, which contains several methodologies by itself. So we would like to thank you from me and from all the team. And for more information, you have all these contacts in the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Enrique. An amazing toolkit for analysis of SDGs, and I think it's very flexible, also kind of methodology and tool that can be easily applied across the board at a national, at local level, and targeted to the specific ambition and needs of a specific community. We are going a bit late, but we have some permission to just go beyond time. So I will actually exploit this permission to be 10-15 minutes late, and therefore I'm very glad to leave the floor to Alexander Heischliger. Alexander, I think you have a hard job in
exactly
trying to be a discussant to these three great panelists, but I'm sure you will.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. It's a very hard time because in here it's 9:30 in the evening. Also, we have dinner very late. It's about to go for dinner, and for others, I guess they have already heard fantastic presentations, I have to say, coming from Malaysia, Reggio Emilia, and also I say now Catalonia, and also, of course, our handbook, which I support a lot because I like it a lot. To wrap up is very difficult, but I try to bring it together also a little bit in the work we have just finished, and therefore also Alice has, let's say, invited us. In the sense we have done, I think it's for the first time, because now we're in 2020 and the SDGs are known since 2015, it's time to measure. It's time to monitor and time to look at what has been achieved or not. We have been entrusted by one of your fellows from the United Nations to analyze, to have a comparative studies on methodologies applied for monitoring SDGs implementation at local and regional level. And we have that work already done. We have submitted it just some days ago. I cannot, and therefore have not prepared any slides. I cannot show it officially yet, but I can at least bring you some of the elements of it. I hope it will be commented very soon, and we have then finalized it by the end, let's say, of July, and it will be also made, let's say, available for everybody. Most important, we have analyzed 49 systems, local monitoring systems altogether, coming from across the world, and we have classified them in 5 categories. The first category is those systems coming or done, powered, promoted by the local and regional government systems themselves, because there are systems which have been, let's say, set up, developed by the local and regional governments by themselves. Then we have, of course, systems which are promoted and powered by national associations or international networks of local and regional governments. Equally important because they have a very good overview. Then we have systems promoted by the national government with a more domestic view, but at the disposal with different purposes for local and regional governments. We have a lot of systems, and the Joint Research Center Handbook is one of them. The OECD and many others are powered and promoted by international organizations. Very important, very important. I come back to that. And then we have, of course, systems which are developed, powered, or promoted by universities, research centers, like Enrique also has working, civil society organization, and other stakeholders. When we come up to the systems as such, very important, it could be a bit of for you also a bit of an agreement, and when you are developing such systems, we have to look at many-fold criteria or elements of it. The first thing what we have looked at, what are the constituent reasons? What are the mandate and what is the purpose of setting up such a monitoring system? It's very important because it gives you already the answers at the beginning when you start. The next is how many actors are there? Which are the actors and for whom is it, let's say, developed? Who are the beneficiary of the systems? We have seen the Joint Research Center Handbook for the cities, maybe not for themselves so much, and others are the other way around. Governance structure, very important as the third element. How is the coordination working? How is it internally working? How is the multi-level governance working? Who are involved, who is not? Is it top-down or is it a bottom-up? Then we come to the indicators. We have here analyzed two issues. The number of it, how many of them are, let's say, monitored. We have heard in the Joint Research Handbook, we look at the 70 SDGs, the 169 indicators, so everybody, but not everybody looks at all of them. You can select. It's very important also, it depends on the size of the city, it depends on whether it's a developed country, emerging country, and then the type of indicators is also important. Is it an existing indicators? Often we see that local governments are struggling to collect data which are asked from another level of government because they don't have it. So we have to come up with ad hoc indicators. It's simple, it's a complex indicator. So these are very important. Coverage also is very important when we look at monitoring by the different sectors. Do we look at poverty? Do we look at health? Do we look at education? Do we look at well-being? Source of for the collection is important. Official data, publicly verified data sources, geospatial data, big data, or other kind of non-traditional data also has been mentioned before. Modalities of collections, alone, together, access to it, who provides it, who does not provide it, and then of course the reporting system. Looking at it very quickly, we have, with these elements in mind, we have applied them on all the 39 systems and come up with several cross findings. The first of all is the purpose. We have identified 3 purposes. The first one is to inform policy-making process when you do the monitoring. Several questions came up. How can we convince the mayor to, let's say, engage in such SDGs and or monitoring? You can tell the mayor, and this is one of our recommendations at the end, if you do that, you will be a better policymaker. If you engage your CEO in that as well, you will have more efficiency in the management of the city. So it's a direct effect, engaging in that, monitoring, measuring in it, you will be a better policymaker, will run and maybe win the next elections, and the citizens are happy. So it's what is good for the citizens is also good for you, and the SDGs are reflecting what the citizens want. The other purpose is aims at supporting, so tools, methodologies for local regional governments in the chasing, the tracking of it, and reporting of it, as the handbook, for example. It's a clear tool and a methodology which allows the other to trace, to track, and also then to report on it. And the last but not least, we have also found the purpose of benchmarking, to compare. We have several of these systems who are comparing with each other. Very important as well. When we look at the coverage of the SDGs, surprise or not, 47% of our systems analyzed, they tackle all 17 SDGs, all indicators. So we are not on half of it, but almost there. When we look at those who are not looking at all of them in the entire set, then we find out that the most looked at, or most attention, or most monitored SDGs are SDG number 4, education, and SDG number 11, the cities, of course, because it's about the local issues, by 83% of the systems. Closely followed by SDG number 16, you may say it's a surprise or not, peace, justice, strong institution, accountability again, the managerial aspect of good institution, and SDG 13, climate, and SDG 17, partnership, respectively, with 77% and 75%. Coming to this cross-cutting, which I will not for, we have done several set of recommendations. As I say, very important is to strengthen local regional governments, that they do a better job when it comes to the implementation and their capacities also to monitor them. Provide them guiding wisdoms. Yeah, provide them. These are the most important skills in order to do that. Therefore, I've seen it in Reggio Emilia. Training is very important. 1 year of training, awareness building is very important, not only to convince the citizens, which are normally easily to be convinced, but also the politician. Offer technology. It has been also asked somewhere. Technology is very important in order to make tracking efforts more efficient and also at the same time contextualize. What is also very important is use the support of the international organizations. I think they have a very important role to play when it comes up to define your proper set of harmonized or heterogeneous set of indicators. They have a lot to say. They have a lot of overview. They are very valuable asset, as we say. In this, what is most important, with this I will end, we can only produce if it's evidence-based, if it's result-oriented. We had the last 5 years a lot of hype talks, a lot of discourse, very often also a bit to seduce electoral people. We have to bring it much more now to realities, considering, of course, the different local realities, but it has to be much more outcome-oriented. Accountability is very important and so on. So what we propose, and I say this now off the record, also there are still 150 people listening to me, what we propose is actually on the broader sense, or to define a very widely agreed and recognized compliance framework. We speak a lot about compliance nowadays. Why don't we define together, and we will, of course, myself and others are helpful to that, a compliance framework with the SDGs, which will promote and lead to much greater commitment among everybody. You can see this also in Europe with other directives, when it's about the famous data protection directive. Is all of a sudden is there, and we have to comply with. So in this monitoring SDGs, a compliance framework could be useful as well if we define it together. I think this is a bit what I would like to say. Having said also that MLIT did a good job in this part, the Joint Research Center did a good part in that one. Also our Italian colleagues, I think with the time, and if there is some time for questions, I'm of course also available. Otherwise, I send you my contact details, just put it in the chat, my email, as well as LinkedIn, and you can also contact me or the others, because I have no slides with the last slide in that chat. Thanks a lot, and I hope I was not too long.
No, thank you very much, Alexander. You were really, you did a fantastic job. I think if our friends from UNITAR do not kill us, I would propose to the three speakers to have 1 minute each, but really 1 minute each, to have one shot, one statement, and then I will take 3 minutes myself to conclude this session. I would go in reverse order. So Enrique, 1 minute.
That took me by surprise, the reverse order. So no, there was a very interesting question by Vania about many projects or initiatives which can be similar. So that's actually a topic we didn't touch, but it's key. So one of the uses that this also has is to analyze project portfolios to understand overlap, but to foster collaboration, to extend best practices, and to disseminate innovative solutions. So in a sense, the wealth of open data and the techniques that we have now to treat and to analyze open data, hopefully will allow us to be more aware of everything that's happening and to maybe support or steer a bit these initiatives without too much touching, because obviously these are bottom-up initiatives and everything comes from individual initiatives and collective initiatives. So you have to understand, you have to support, you have to steer, but not too much.
Okay, thank you, Enrique. Norlisa?
Yeah, I think from me it's just that implementing the SDGs needs to be really about addressing the local issues. So anything that should be easy, that could be adaptive to the local situation, probably is the best way. So even though we can come up with a system, a methodology, a framework, but in the end of the day, I think what's most important is addressing what's most needed to achieve the goals locally. So yeah, so whether or not we have a firm methodology or not, I think it's not important sometimes. That's all from me. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Norlisa. Serena?
What I can add is that we are in an ongoing process, and so just catching on what Norlisa was saying, we need technology, we need support in terms of the process and how to frame it and be guided, but we also need to test, go with trial and errors and try, and that's the effort that we are actually putting on, with a strong understanding that we must not act alone as single islands living in separate domains, but we must share it both at the local community level, but also at the international level with experiences such as this. And this is the most fruitful action that we can have.
Thank you very much, Serena. Now it's my 2 minutes of glory. I would like first to thank warmly all the speakers and panelists in order of appearance, Alice, Paola, Serena, Norlisa, Enrique, Alexander. Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the participants. It has been amazing. I mean, the chat was amazing. I think you have made us richer both in thoughts and enthusiasm with your participation here. Thank you very much. And I would like to not to wrap up because Alexander did a great job. The speakers did a great job, so I don't have any more words of wisdom to add to this. But I would like just to tell you that we are engaged and committed to move on. And we are committed to take the handbook, test it, have some real exchange with cities, with local administrations, with the practitioners, with academia, with all of you, because we believe that it's not about just being a great scientist on a desk in an office, but also being a great scientist in understanding what's going on, what's the buzz out there in the cities and the local administrations. And that is something that makes science alive and applied to real life of citizens. So thanks again. Hope you have a nice day, night, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Thanks a lot. We will keep it rolling. Thanks and bye-bye to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.